Imagine you're at a funeral. The church is quiet, filled with people whose faces you recognize, family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. You walk slowly toward the front, and as you approach the casket, you suddenly realize the person lying there is you. This is your funeral some years from now. One by one, people stand to speak about the life you lived, your spouse, your children, a close friend, a coworker, someone from your community. What do you hear them say? What kind of partner were you? What kind of parent? What kind of friend? What difference did you make? What will you be remembered for? That exercise is not a morbid fantasy. It's the opening invitation in one of the most influential personal development books ever written, a book that has sold over 40 million copies and transformed the way leaders, parents, and ordinary people approach their lives. The book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and its author, Stephen R. Covey, was not a motivational speaker looking for a quick hit. He was a deeply thoughtful man who spent decades studying the literature of success, going back over 200 years, and discovered something startling. In the last 50 years, the way we think about success had fundamentally shifted, and not for the better. Before the 20th century, success literature was almost entirely about character. Integrity, humility, courage, patience, justice, the golden rule. These were the foundations of a life well lived. But after World War I, the focus shifted to what Covey called the personality ethic, a fixation on techniques, public image, quick fixes, and social manipulation. How to win friends, how to influence people, how to look successful rather than how to be successful from the inside out. Covey argued that this shift had produced a shallow, unsustainable version of effectiveness, and that the only path to lasting success and fulfillment was to return to the character ethic, building our lives on principles that are as unshakable as gravity. Over the next hour or so, we're going to walk through the 7 habits that make up Covey's framework, but not as a checklist of productivity hacks. We'll explore them as an integrated, sequential path, a maturity continuum that moves from dependence to independence to interdependence. You'll learn why some people are perpetually reactive, blaming their circumstances, while the truly effective take radical ownership of their lives. You'll discover why starting with a clear vision of your destination transforms every decision you make today. You'll understand how to put first things first so that your schedule reflects your deepest values, not just your urgent demands. And then we'll cross a threshold into the habits that govern relationships, how to think win-win, how to genuinely understand others before seeking to be understood, and how to create synergy that produces results no individual could achieve alone. Finally, we'll explore the habit of renewal, the one that makes all the others possible. By the end, you'll not only understand these 7 habits, but you'll have a practical roadmap to begin integrating them into your life this week. My promise is that if you engage with these ideas honestly, you will never look at a conflict, a goal, or a calendar the same way again. You'll start to see your life not as a series of reactions to whatever happens, but as a deliberate creation, rooted in principles that endure. That's the transformation, and it begins with a single, profound idea that underlies everything else. There is a core message in the 7 habits of highly effective people that, if you absorb it fully, makes every subsequent lesson feel like common sense. Stephen Covey writes, "We see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we are conditioned to see it. This means that our perceptions, our paradigms, shape every outcome in our lives more than any external technique ever could. The way we see the problem is the problem, and if we want to change our lives in a meaningful and lasting way, we must first change the way we see." Covey illustrates this with a simple but striking visual experiment. Imagine you're shown a drawing of a young woman, elegant, wearing a feathered hat. You study it. Then you're shown a different drawing, this one of an old woman with a large nose and a shawl. If you first saw the young woman, you might struggle to see the old woman in the combined image and vice versa. 2 people can look at the exact same picture and see completely different things. Both are convinced they're right. This is a paradigm, a mental map of how we think the world works. And our paradigms about life, relationships, and ourselves are just as stubborn, just as invisible to us, and just as powerful in shaping our behavior. Traditional self-help often tries to change behavior directly, new techniques, new habits, new scripts. Covey calls this the outside-in approach. It can produce temporary results, but it rarely lasts because the underlying paradigm hasn't shifted. If you believe deep down that you're a victim of circumstance, no productivity system will make you proactive. If you believe that relationships are transactional, no communication technique will create genuine trust. Covey's approach is inside out. It starts with the core of who you are, your character, your motives, your deepest beliefs, and then allows your behavior to flow naturally from that renewed center. This is the difference between the personality ethic and the character ethic. The personality ethic says, smile more, use people's names, mirror their body language, and you'll get ahead. The character ethic says, become a person of integrity, and your influence will be genuine and lasting. Covey isn't saying techniques are useless. He's saying they must be built on a foundation of authentic character, or they become hollow manipulation that people eventually see through. The 7 habits themselves are not a random collection of tips. They are an integrated sequence, moving from dependence, the state of relying on others to take care of you, to independence, the ability to take responsibility for your own life, to interdependence, the recognition that the greatest achievements require collaboration with others, built on a foundation of mutual respect. Habits 1, 2, and 3 are the private victory, the mastery of self. Habits 4, 5, and 6 are the public victory, the mastery of relationships. Habit 7 is the renewal that sustains the entire system. You cannot skip a step. Trying to be interdependent before you are independent is like trying to build a house without a foundation. The rest of the book simply expands this framework into a practical, life-changing methodology. Now, let's begin where Covey begins, with the single habit that makes all the others possible. It's the habit of taking radical, absolute responsibility for your own life. It's called proactivity, and it's not what most people think it is. The word proactive has become a business cliché, but Covey gave it a very specific and powerful meaning. He didn't define it as taking initiative, though that's part of it. He defined it as the ability to pause between a stimulus and your response, and in that pause, to exercise your uniquely human gift of choice. A reactive person is controlled by the stimulus. Something happens and they react automatically, driven by emotion, circumstance, or conditioning. A proactive person feels the same impulse, but they recognize that the impulse does not compel the action. There is a space, and in that space lies freedom. Covey draws on the experience of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi death camps. Frankl observed that even in the most dehumanizing conditions imaginable, some prisoners retained a sense of inner freedom. They could not choose their circumstances, but they could choose their response to those circumstances. The guards could take everything except what Frankl called the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. That insight became the foundation of Covey's first habit. Language, Covey noted, is a powerful indicator of where we locate our power. Reactive language sounds like this: he makes me so angry, I have to do this, I can't help it, that's just the way I am. Every one of those statements transfers power to something or someone else. Proactive language replaces them with, I choose my response, I prefer to do this, I will find a way, I can change my approach. The difference is not semantic, it's existential. The person who says, I have to, has handed the keys of her life to her circumstances. The person who says, I choose to, is holding the keys. Covey introduces a powerful mental model, the circle of concern and the circle of influence. Every person has a wide circle of concern, all the things they care about. From the weather to the economy to their health to their children's future. Inside that circle is a smaller circle of influence, the things they can actually do something about. Reactive people focus their energy on the outer circle, on things they can't control, and their circle of influence shrinks. Proactive people focus on what they can influence, and over time, their circle of influence expands. In real life, a student who blames the teacher for her poor grade is operating reactively. The teacher is in her circle of concern, but she has no direct control over the teacher. If she shifts her focus to her own study habits, her own questions, her own effort, things within her circle of influence, she may find that not only does her grade improve, but the teacher's attitude toward her shifts as well. An employee who complains about the boss or the company culture is in the outer circle. The proactive employee asks, "What can I do to improve this situation, even slightly? How can I be a model of the culture I want to see?" A business owner facing a market downturn can either rail against the economy or focus on innovating, cutting costs, and serving her remaining customers better. An investor who panics during a market correction is reacting to a stimulus. The proactive investor reviews her strategy, assesses whether anything fundamental has changed, and makes a deliberate choice. What can you do tomorrow? For one full day, carry a small card and make a tally mark every time you catch yourself using reactive language, words like "I have to," "I can't," "he made me." Just the act of noticing is transformative. At the end of the day, review your tallies. You'll be surprised how often you've been handing your power away. Then, for each tally, think of a proactive alternative. A common mistake is to equate proactivity with being pushy or aggressive. That's not it. Proactivity is about internal sovereignty, not external dominance. Another mistake is to think that proactive people don't feel negative emotions. They do. They simply don't let those emotions dictate their actions. And some people misuse this principle to blame themselves for things that are genuinely outside their control: illness, accidents, other people's behavior. Proactivity doesn't mean you caused everything in your life. It means you take responsibility for your response to whatever happens. The limitation of this habit is that it can be exhausting in situations of chronic oppression or abuse, where the stimulus is relentless. Frankel's insight was a lifeline, but it required immense inner resources. In some contexts, the first proactive step must be to remove oneself from the harmful environment, if possible. And for those dealing with mental health conditions that impair executive function, proactivity may need to be supported by professional treatment. In the modern world of social media, the reactive cycle is amplified. A notification appears and we react. An inflammatory post appears and we react. The space between stimulus and response has been engineered to be as narrow as possible. Reclaiming that space is a radical act. The takeaway: between what happens to you and your response is a gap. In that gap lies your freedom. Will you exercise it, or will you let the world program you like a machine? Once you begin to operate from that freedom, the next question becomes, where exactly do you want to go? That's the second habit. Covey asks you to imagine yourself at your own funeral, as we did at the start. Who do you want to have been? What do you want your loved ones, your community, your colleagues to say about you? This is not a morbid question. It's the most clarifying question you can possibly ask. Because if you do know where you're going, any road will take you there. And most people, Covey observed, spend their lives climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind, is about making sure your ladder is leaning against the right wall. Everything in life is created twice, Covey explains. First in the mind, then in the physical world. A building is not constructed until a blueprint is drawn. A symphony is not performed until notes are written. A life, too, must be designed before it can be lived. This is the principle of mental creation. To skip this step is to let other people and other forces, society, your parents, your fears, your past, write the script for your life by default. Beginning with the end in mind means consciously writing your own script. At the center of this habit is the idea of a personal mission statement. Covey suggests it should be based on principles, timeless, universal truths like integrity, service, love, growth, contribution. It should articulate what kind of person you want to be and what you want to contribute. It's not a to-do list. It's a constitution for your life against which every decision can be measured. When you're faced with a choice, you don't ask, "What's easiest?" or "What will make me look good?" You ask, "What does my mission require?" Covey also introduces the concept of centers. Every person has a center, whether they know it or not, the thing around which their life revolves. For some, it's their spouse. For others, it's their work, their money, their children, their possessions, their pleasure, or even their enemies. A person centered on work will be devastated by a career setback. A person centered on a spouse will be emotionally volatile depending on the spouse's mood. A person centered on money will never have enough. Covey's solution is to center your life on principles. Principles don't change. They don't abandon you. They provide a stable, unchanging foundation from which you can navigate a changing world. In a student's life, beginning with the end in mind might mean envisioning the person she wants to be at graduation, not just the degree she wants, but the skills, the character, the relationships. That vision then guides her daily choices. An employee might craft a career mission statement that clarifies what she wants to contribute, not just what title she wants to achieve. A business owner who begins with the end in mind doesn't just chase quarterly profits. She builds an enterprise that reflects her deepest values, with a legacy that outlasts her. An investor begins with a clear financial independence goal, then works backward to determine the savings rate and asset allocation required. What can you do tomorrow? Set aside 30 minutes of quiet time. Imagine your 80th birthday. Picture the people who will gather. What do you hope they will say about the person you became? Jot down the qualities and contributions that surface. Then draft a rough personal mission statement. It doesn't have to be perfect. It might be a single sentence. I want to live a life of integrity, service, and continuous growth. Or it might be more detailed. The point is to create a compass, not a detailed map. A common mistake is to think this is a one-time exercise. Covey recommends revisiting the mission statement regularly, as our understanding of ourselves deepens. Another mistake is to write a statement full of noble-sounding words that don't actually resonate with you. It must be authentic, and some people get paralyzed trying to find the perfect wording. The perfect wording is the enemy of a good enough statement that you can start using today. The limitation is that some people, particularly those in survival mode, may find the luxury of envisioning a distant future to be out of reach. If you're struggling to put food on the table, beginning with the end in mind might need to start with a very short-term vision, the end of this week, this month, and expand from there. In a world of constant distraction, where we're told what to value by algorithms and advertisers, writing your own script is an act of rebellion. The takeaway: if you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else. And someone else's plan for you rarely includes your fulfillment. Once you've defined your destination, you need a system to get you there. That's the third habit, putting first things first. You now have a vision of who you want to be. You've made the decision to be proactive in creating that life. But between your vision and your daily reality lies a chasm, and the bridge across that chasm is the habit of putting first things first. Covey calls this the habit of personal management, and it's the practical execution of the first two habits. Habit 1 says, you're the creator. Habit 2 says, here's the blueprint. Habit 3 says, now build it brick by brick, starting with the most important bricks. Covey introduces a time management matrix that has become legendary. It divides all activities into 4 quadrants based on urgency and importance. Quadrant 1 is urgent and important, crises, deadlines, emergencies. Quadrant 2 is not urgent but important, planning. Relationship building, skill development, exercise, deep work. Quadrant 3 is urgent but not important, interruptions, some phone calls, some emails, other people's priorities. Quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important, trivial busy work, mindless scrolling, some escape activities. The key insight is that effective people spend the bulk of their time in Quadrant 2, the realm of what matters but isn't screaming. Reactive people are tossed around by Quadrant 1 and Quadrant 3, constantly putting out fires or responding to the demands of others. The reason we neglect Quadrant 2 is that it requires us to act on the basis of importance rather than urgency. Importance is a function of our mission and values. Urgency is a function of external pressure. And urgency almost always feels more pressing than importance, even though the important things are what shape our lives in the long run. The person who never exercises because she's always too busy will eventually face a health crisis, a Quadrant 1 emergency that could have been prevented by Quadrant 2 activity. The person who never invests in relationships because work is urgent may find herself alone when she needs support. The habit of putting first things first is the discipline of scheduling your priorities rather than prioritizing your schedule. Covey emphasizes that this is not just about time management, it's about self-management. It requires the ability to say no to other people, to attractive distractions, and to the part of yourself that wants immediate gratification. It requires integrity in the moment of choice, the willingness to act on your values even when no one is watching and no deadline is looming. For a student, this might mean scheduling 2 hours every afternoon for focused study before checking social media or hanging out with friends. The study time is quadrant 2. The social media is often quadrant 4. The choice between them, made consistently, determines the outcome of the semester. An employee might block out the first hour of every day for strategic thinking or skill development before the flood of emails and requests arrives. That's quadrant 2. Responding to every email as it comes in is quadrant 3. A business owner might dedicate Friday afternoons to reviewing the company's vision and building relationships with key clients, rather than getting sucked into operational minutiae. An investor might automate her contributions and set a quarterly review schedule, rather than checking her portfolio daily, a quadrant 4 activity that masquerades as diligence. Tomorrow, conduct a quadrant audit. For one day, track your activities in 15-minute increments and classify each into one of the 4 quadrants. At the end of the day, look at the distribution. How much time did you spend in quadrant 2? For most people, it's alarmingly little. Then, identify one quadrant 2 activity that you've been neglecting and schedule a non-negotiable block of time for it in the coming week. Treat that block with the same respect you'd give a meeting with your most important client. A common mistake is to fill every moment of the day with activity, leaving no space for reflection, spontaneity, or the unexpected. Covey's matrix is not about maximizing busyness, it's about maximizing effectiveness. Another mistake is to think that quadrant 2 is always work-related. Deepening a relationship, playing with your children, taking a walk in nature. These are all high-leverage quadrant 2 activities that replenish your soul. The limitation is that some people have jobs or life circumstances where genuine emergencies are constant, and they have very little control over their time. A single parent working 2 jobs may not have the luxury of a 2-hour quadrant 2 block. In such cases, the principle scales down. Even 5 minutes of intentional connection or self-care is a quadrant 2 victory. In the modern era of push notifications and always-on culture, the urgency addiction is more intense than ever. The ping of a new message triggers a dopamine hit, and entire companies are designed to keep you in quadrant 3. Reclaiming your attention is not a minor productivity tip, it's a battle for your soul. The takeaway: the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. The person who masters this habit doesn't just get more done, she gets the right things done, and her life begins to reflect her deepest values. With the private victory habits now in place, you're ready to move from independence to interdependence, starting with the 4th habit, the mindset of mutual benefit. Imagine you're negotiating a deal. You could push for every advantage, squeezing the other party until they feel resentful. You might win this round, but you've sown seeds of distrust. Or you could concede everything, wanting to be liked, and walk away feeling exploited. Both are lose-win or win-lose outcomes. There's a third way, and Covey argues it's the only sustainable one for long-term effectiveness. Think win-win. This is not a technique. It's a philosophy of human interaction that seeks mutual benefit in all relationships. It's based on the belief that there is plenty for everyone, that one person's success does not require another's failure. Covey outlines 6 paradigms of human interaction: win-win, win-lose, lose-win, lose-lose, win, and win-win or no deal. Win-lose is the authoritarian competitive mindset. If I win, you lose. It's common in sports, law, and many corporate cultures, but in relationships and teams it breeds resentment. Lose-win is the doormat mindset. I lose so you can win. It seems nice, but it's often rooted in low self-esteem, and it eventually leads to an explosion of buried anger. Lose-lose is the mindset of revenge. If I'm going down, you're going down with me. Win is the purely self-centered approach. I just care about my own outcome. Win-win or no deal is the mature position. We seek mutual benefit, and if we can't find a solution that works for both of us, we agree to disagree amicably, preserving the relationship for the future. Covey emphasizes that win-win requires a foundation of character, integrity, maturity, and what he calls an abundance mentality. The scarcity mentality sees life as a limited pie. If someone else gets a big slice, there's less for me. The abundance mentality recognizes that the pie can be expanded, that there are enough resources, recognition, and opportunities for everyone. It's not about being naive. It's about approaching negotiations and relationships from a place of creative possibility rather than fearful competition. For a student working on a group project, the win-lose approach might be to dominate the work and take all the credit. The lose-win approach might be to coast and let others carry the load. The win-win approach is to collaborate genuinely, ensuring everyone's voice is heard, and the final product reflects the best of what the group can produce. An employee in a competitive sales environment might default to win-lose, seeing colleagues as rivals. But the win-win salesperson builds alliances, shares leads, and discovers that collaboration often generates more business for everyone. A business owner negotiating with a supplier could try to crush them on price, but a win-win approach might involve a longer contract, shared efficiencies, and a partnership that benefits both companies over time. An investor entering a joint venture must structure the deal so that all parties have aligned incentives. If one party's gain comes at the expense of the other, the partnership will eventually crumble. What can you do tomorrow? Identify a relationship or a negotiation where you've been operating with a win-lose or lose-win mindset. Before your next interaction, pause and ask, what would a win-win outcome look like here? What does the other party truly need? How can I be both courageous in advocating for my own needs and considerate of theirs? Write down your ideas and bring them to the conversation. A common mistake is to confuse win-win with compromise. Compromise is often a low-level form of lose-lose. Both parties give up something they want. Win-win goes deeper, seeking a creative solution that fully satisfies both parties' core interests. Another mistake is to think win-win means being soft or avoiding conflict. It often requires more courage to seek mutual benefit than to dominate or capitulate. The limitation is that not everyone will play by win-win rules. Some people are deeply committed to win-lose. In those cases, Covey's win-win or no-deal option is the safeguard. You can say, let's only proceed if we can find an agreement that works for both of us. If not, no deal, and that's okay. This preserves your integrity and keeps the door open. In the modern collaborative economy, from open-source software to co-working spaces, the abundance mentality has become a competitive advantage. The lone genius myth is fading. The winners are those who can build ecosystems of mutual benefit. The takeaway: in the long run, if it's not a win for both, it's a loss for both. The richest relationships and the most enduring successes are built on the foundation of mutual benefit. But to create that benefit, you first have to do something that most people are terrible at: genuinely understand the other person. That's habit 5. If you had to pick the single habit that most transforms relationships, personal, professional, political, this is the one. Covey tells a story of a father whose son refuses to talk to him. The father tries everything: reasoning, questioning, lecturing. Nothing works. Finally, in desperation, he turns to Covey, who suggests one thing: listen to your son, not with the intent to reply, but with the intent to truly understand. The father resists. He wants to fix, to advise, to correct. But when he finally sits with his son and reflects back what he hears without judgment, the dam breaks. The son pours out his heart. The father, for the first time, understands the world from his son's perspective. The relationship begins to heal. Seek first to understand, then to be understood is Covey's 5th habit, and it's deceptively simple. Most of us, he notes, listen with the intent to reply. We're not really hearing the other person. We're preparing our counterargument, our story, our brilliant advice. We filter everything through our own autobiography. When someone talks about a problem, we respond by talking about our own similar experience. When someone shares a feeling, we try to fix it or minimize it. This is what Covey calls autobiographical listening. It's not malicious, but it fails to create deep connection. The alternative is empathic listening, not sympathetic listening, where you feel sorry for the person. Empathic listening is the act of fully, deeply understanding another person's perspective, intellectually and emotionally. It's listening with the intent to get inside their frame of reference, to see the world as they see it. This doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It means you have to understand them so thoroughly that you could make their case for them as well as they could. Only then are you truly qualified to offer your own perspective. Covey introduces a powerful tool, the psychological air of being understood. Just as we need physical air to breathe, we need psychological air to thrive. When you give someone the experience of being deeply understood, you release a pressure valve in their soul. They become more open, more reasonable, less defensive. And the remarkable thing is, once you've done that, they often become far more willing to hear you. The order is crucial. Understand first, then seek to be understood. In a student's life, this might mean listening to a classmate's idea before dismissing it, truly trying to see its merits. It might mean, in a conflict with a roommate, sitting down and saying, "Help me understand how you're feeling about this," and then simply reflecting back what you hear. An employee who wants to pitch a new initiative to a skeptical boss might first spend time understanding the boss's pressures, fears, and objectives. When the pitch comes, it's framed in the boss's language, addressing the boss's concerns. That's not manipulation, it's respect. A business owner negotiating with a partner who is upset might resist the urge to defend and instead say, "You're really frustrated. Tell me more about what's not working." The partner feels heard, and the conversation shifts from attack to collaboration. An investor listening to a startup pitch might move past the financials and ask the founder about her vision, her struggles, her why. That deep understanding informs a better investment decision. Starting tomorrow, in your next significant conversation, practice this. Make it your goal to understand so well that you can summarize the other person's point of view to their satisfaction. Before you offer your own opinion, say, "Let me see if I've got this right. What you're saying is." And then reflect back what you heard, the content and the feeling. Notice what happens. The other person will often visibly relax because they finally feel heard. A common mistake is to use empathic listening as a mechanical technique without genuine care. People can smell insincerity. The spirit must be authentic. Another mistake is to confuse understanding with agreement. You can understand someone's racist belief without endorsing it. You can then choose to challenge it, but you challenge it from a place of connection rather than condemnation. The limitation is that empathic listening requires emotional bandwidth that may not always be available. If you're depleted, you may need to first attend to your own state so you can truly be present for another. And in situations of abuse or manipulation, understanding the other's perspective is not a substitute for setting firm boundaries. In an age of polarized social media debates, where everyone is shouting and no one is listening, this habit is a revolutionary act. It's the difference between a dialogue that deepens understanding and a flame war that dehumanizes the opponent. The takeaway: the deepest hunger of the human heart is to be understood. When you meet that hunger in another person, you open a door that no argument can force open. And when two people who have deeply understood each other come together to create something new, something magical can happen. That's the sixth habit: synergy. Covey defines synergy as the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. It's the creative energy that emerges when people with different perspectives, strengths, and experiences come together in an atmosphere of mutual respect and produce something that none of them could have produced alone. Synergy is not just cooperation or teamwork, it's the alchemy of genuine collaboration. 1 + 1 = 3 or 10 or 1,000. The key to synergy, Covey explains, is to value the differences between people rather than merely tolerating them. Most people see differences as threats. Someone with a different opinion challenges my sense of certainty. my ego, my status. So we either avoid those differences, argue against them, or try to convert the other person to our view. The synergistic person sees differences as a source of new possibilities. If you and I both have the same perspective, one of us is redundant. But if you see the world differently than I do, and I can honor that difference, we can combine our visions and see something neither of us saw before. He shares a story of a family vacation planning session. The husband wants a fishing trip. The wife wants a cultural tour. The win-lose approach would be for one to dominate. The lose-win approach would be for one to sacrifice. The compromise would be a trip that pleases neither fully. But a synergistic approach might involve deep conversation about what each truly values, relaxation and nature for him, learning and stimulation for her, and the discovery of a mountain lodge near a museum town that offers both hiking and art. Neither would have thought of it alone. For a student team working on a presentation, synergy means more than dividing up slides and stitching them together. It means brainstorming together, openly, with a spirit of yes and rather than yes but. The quiet member's offbeat idea sparks the loud member's refinement, and the final presentation is something fresh and powerful. An employee in a cross-functional meeting can either defend her department's turf or genuinely inquire how her department can better serve others, and together they design a new workflow that benefits everyone. A business owner facing a strategic dilemma convenes her leadership team and deliberately invites dissent, encouraging people to voice the uncomfortable truths. Out of the clash of honest perspectives, a breakthrough strategy emerges. An investor part of a mastermind group listens to a peer's analysis of a company he had dismissed. Their combined research uncovers an opportunity neither would have spotted independently. Tomorrow, think of a disagreement or a creative challenge you're facing with another person. Schedule a conversation with the explicit intention of practicing synergy. Begin by affirming that you value the other person's perspective and that your goal is to create something better than either of you could alone. Then, genuinely explore the differences, not as obstacles, but as raw materials for a new solution. A common mistake is to rush to synergy without first building the emotional bank account of trust, or without the mutual understanding that comes from habits 4 and 5. Synergy is a high-trust activity. In a low-trust environment, it can backfire. Another mistake is to think synergy means avoiding conflict. In fact, it often involves surfacing conflict and working through it creatively. The limitation is that synergy requires a certain level of psychological safety and openness that not all environments provide. In a toxic workplace, an attempt at synergy might be met with suspicion or exploitation. Sometimes, the first step is to create the conditions for trust or to find a different environment. In the modern era of remote work and global teams, the ability to create synergy across cultures, time zones, and communication styles is a superpower. The tools are different: Zoom instead of a conference room, but the principle is identical. Value the difference and let it generate something new. The takeaway: the greatest achievements in history were not solo acts. They were symphonies of diverse minds, playing together in a spirit of creative collaboration. Become a conductor of that symphony. Even a conductor needs to keep her instrument in tune. That's the final habit, the one that makes all the others possible. Sharpen the saw. A man is sawing down a tree. He's been at it for hours, sweating, exhausted. A passerby suggests, "Why don't you stop for a moment and sharpen the saw? You cut much faster." The man replies, "I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I'm too busy sawing." That's the 7th habit. It's the habit of renewal, the deliberate investment in your greatest asset, yourself. Without it, all the other habits become dull and ineffective over time. Covey identifies 4 dimensions of renewal: physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual. Each requires consistent attention. Physical renewal includes exercise, nutrition, sleep, and stress management. It's not just about looking good. It's about having the energy to be proactive, to put first things first, to engage in the demanding work of relationships. A body that is neglected will eventually force a quadrant 1 crisis. Mental renewal involves reading, learning, writing, and exposing yourself to new ideas. It's how you keep your mind sharp, which directly feeds your ability to begin with the end in mind and to think creatively about win-win solutions. Social and emotional renewal is about investing in relationships, building emotional bank accounts, practicing empathy, and giving to others. This dimension sustains the public victory habits. Spiritual renewal can take many forms: meditation, prayer, time in nature, engagement with great art or literature. It's the practice of reconnecting with your deepest values and your sense of purpose, the wellspring of your personal mission statement. Covey emphasizes that these four dimensions are interconnected, and neglecting any one of them weakens the whole. A person who is physically healthy but spiritually bankrupt will lack direction. A person who is mentally sharp but socially isolated will lack the richness of relationships. The goal is balanced renewal, not obsessive optimization of one area at the expense of others. He frames this as the upward spiral of growth. As you renew yourself, you deepen your understanding of the principles that underlie the habits, and you return to the first habit with greater clarity and strength. The 7 habits are not a linear path you walk once. They are a spiral you ascend repeatedly throughout your life. For a student, sharpen the saw might mean taking breaks during study sessions to exercise, calling a friend, or reading something for pure pleasure rather than just for class. An employee who burns the candle at both ends without renewal will eventually flame out. The sharpened saw includes leaving work at a reasonable hour, taking real vacations, and investing in professional development. A business owner who is constantly in the grind may lose the vision that started it all. Quarterly retreats, coaching, and time with family are not luxuries. They are maintenance of the saw. An investor who spends every waking hour analyzing markets can lose perspective. Taking time for physical activity, reading history, and connecting with loved ones keeps the mind balanced and the decisions sound. Starting tomorrow, assess the state of your saw in each of the 4 dimensions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how sharp are you physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually? Pick the lowest scoring dimension and schedule one small renewal activity for the coming week. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. A 30-minute walk, a call to an old friend, 10 minutes of meditation, reading a chapter of a book that inspires you. The key is consistency, not intensity. A common mistake is to treat renewal as a reward you get only after all the work is done. The work is never done. Renewal must be a proactive habit, not a reactive afterthought. Another mistake is to focus exclusively on one dimension: the gym rat who neglects relationships, the bookworm who neglects the body. Balance is the goal. The limitation is that some people have such demanding life circumstances that carving out time for renewal feels impossible. But even the busiest person can find micro moments of renewal. A minute of deep breathing, a moment of gratitude before a meal, a brief stretch between tasks. The principle scales. In the modern burnout culture, where exhaustion is often worn as a badge of honor, the 7th habit is a quiet act of rebellion. It says that your worth is not measured by your depletion. It says that rest is productive, that play is strategic, and that a life of enduring effectiveness is a marathon, not a sprint. The takeaway: you are your most important instrument. Keep it tuned and the music will flow. Neglect it, and every song will eventually sound flat. And now, having explored the architecture of effectiveness, let's step back and examine the book with a critical eye. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People has been a cornerstone of personal development for decades, but no work of this magnitude is beyond critique. Academics point out that Covey's framework, while powerfully intuitive, is not grounded in empirical research. The habits are drawn from his study of success literature, his own observations, and his consulting work, not from controlled experiments. Some psychologists note that the book's moral tone, rooted in Covey's deep Mormon faith, may not resonate with readers from different worldviews, even though Covey deliberately used universal language. From a practical standpoint, critics argue that the book is dense and sometimes preachy. Its 7 habits, while memorable, can feel like a lot to implement simultaneously, and Covey himself acknowledges that they are a lifelong practice, not a quick fix. Some business critics have noted that the book's focus on character and principles, while noble, can underplay the role of systemic barriers and power dynamics in organizations. An employee trying to be proactive and think win-win in a deeply toxic, win-lose corporate culture may find Covey's advice insufficient without a strategy for systemic change. Modern readers have also observed that the book's examples, written in 1989, can feel dated in their gender roles and cultural references. The world of work has changed dramatically. Remote work, the gig economy, the internet, and some of the specific applications need translation. What do experts generally agree with? The core framework of moving from dependence to independence to interdependence is psychologically sound and deeply aligned with developmental psychology. The emphasis on principle-centered living, proactive language, and empathic listening is validated by research in cognitive behavioral therapy and interpersonal neurobiology. The idea that we must work on ourselves before we can effectively work with others is timeless. The book's enduring popularity is not an accident. It speaks to a genuine hunger for depth in a shallow age. A balanced view is that The 7 Habits is a philosophical and practical framework, not a scientific treatise. It is best used as a compass for character development, complemented by other tools for specific skills like financial literacy, negotiation tactics, or mental health support. With that perspective, let's explore how these habits function in the world we inhabit today. If Stephen Covey were writing in the 21st century, he would find a world that his framework seems almost eerily suited to address. The reactive mind has found its perfect amplifier in the smartphone. The notifications, the breaking news alerts, the endless scroll, these are all designed to shrink the gap between stimulus and response to zero. Habit 1, be proactive, has never been more needed or more difficult. The practice of pausing, of choosing a response rather than reacting, is an act of mental sovereignty in an age of engineered distraction. The rise of AI and automation makes habit 2 begin with the end in mind, especially urgent. Careers that seemed stable are being disrupted. The question, what do I truly want to contribute, is not a philosophical luxury, it's a survival skill. The person with a clear personal mission can navigate change with purpose. The person without one will be tossed by every wave. Remote work has blurred the boundaries between work and life, making habit 3, put first things first, a daily battleground. Without the structure of an office, the urgent crowds out the important, and many people find themselves busier than ever but less effective. The discipline of scheduling quadrant 2 activities, deep work, relationships, renewal, is what separates the remote worker who thrives from the one who burns out. The digital creator economy and the rise of collaborative platforms make habits 4, 5, and 6 more relevant than ever. Think win-win is the ethos of successful online communities and partnerships. Seek first to understand is the missing ingredient in a world of polarized tweets and algorithmic echo chambers. Synergy is what happens when diverse creators collaborate across borders, producing content and ideas that no single mind could generate. Side hustles, the gig economy, and the quest for financial independence all require the private victory habits, proactivity, vision, and disciplined execution, before they can yield sustainable results. And in a culture of constant hustle, the 7th habit, sharpen the saw, is a lifesaver. The wellness industry, meditation apps, and the focus on mental health are all, in a sense, mass-scale efforts to address the renewal deficit that Covey warned about. In short, the habits are not relics of a pre-digital age. They are survival skills for the modern mind. And to see how they work in real life, let's meet 3 people who applied them. First, there's Amara, a 29-year-old marketing professional. She was talented but deeply reactive. Whenever her boss criticized her work, she'd spend days in a funk, complaining to colleagues and doubting her abilities. She read the 7 Habits and the proactive model hit her hard. She realized she'd been handing over her emotional well-being to her boss every time she received feedback. She began practicing the pause. When a critical email arrived, She wouldn't open it until she had taken 5 minutes to center herself and remind herself that feedback was information, not a verdict on her worth. She started using proactive language. I choose to learn from this. Over several months, her confidence grew, not because her boss changed, but because she had reclaimed her response. She began to perform better, and interestingly, her boss's tone toward her softened. The lesson: you can't control others, but you can control your response, and sometimes that changes the entire dynamic. Now consider David, a 48-year-old father and middle manager. He was climbing the corporate ladder, but his marriage was strained, and his teenage son had become distant. He was working 60-hour weeks, convinced he was doing it for his family. The funeral visualization exercise in Habit 2 shook him. He imagined his funeral and heard his son say, "Dad was always working. I never really knew him." That image broke him open. He wrote a personal mission statement that put his family at the center, not just in words but in scheduled time. He began practicing Habit 3, blocking out every Saturday as sacred family time. It was difficult at first. Work tried to encroach, but he stayed disciplined. He started taking his son on weekend hikes, just the two of them. At first, the conversations were awkward, but over time, the silence turned into talk and the talk turned into trust. His marriage improved because he was present, not just physically, but emotionally. His career didn't collapse. In fact, the renewal from his family life made him more energized and creative at work. The lesson: the ladder doesn't matter if it's leaning against the wrong wall. Reposition it before it's too late. Finally, meet Sophia, a 35-year-old entrepreneur who built a tech startup. She was brilliant but burned out. Her company was growing, but the culture was toxic. She had a win-lose mindset with her co-founder, constantly jockeying for control. Turnover was high. A mentor gave her Covey's book, and Habit 4, Think Win-Win, and Habit 5, Seek First to Understand, became her focus. She sat down with her co-founder and for the first time truly listened. Not to win an argument, but to understand his frustrations, his vision, his fears. She reflected back what she heard. Then she shared her own. The conversation was tense, but for the first time they were on the same team, facing the problem together. They renegotiated their roles with a win-win agreement. Then Sophia began applying empathic listening to her entire team. She held one-on-ones where she simply asked, "What's working? What's not? What do you need?" She didn't interrupt, didn't defend. She just understood. The culture began to shift. Trust rebuilt. People started collaborating with synergy, and the business entered a new phase of innovation. The lesson: the public victory is built on a foundation of genuine understanding and mutual benefit. These three lives, so different on the surface, were all transformed by the same timeless sequence: private victory, then public victory sustained by renewal. The question is, what does your transformation look like? Let's create a practical action plan. The following steps are drawn directly from the 7 habits, designed to be implemented not all at once but sequentially and steadily. Step 1. Practice the pause for 1 week. Set a chime on your phone to go off every few hours. When it sounds, check in with yourself. Are you reacting or responding? Write down one moment each day where you paused and chose a response rather than reacting automatically. Why? Because proactivity is a muscle. The mistake is expecting perfection. Just notice and redirect. The outcome is a growing sense of agency. Step 2. Write a rough draft of your personal mission statement. Spend 30 minutes visualizing your 80th birthday. What do you want people to say? What kind of person do you want to become? Write a paragraph that captures your deepest values and aspirations. Why? Without a destination, you drift. The mistake is trying to make it perfect. It will evolve. The outcome is a compass for your decisions. Step 3. Identify one quadrant 2 activity that you know you should be doing but have been neglecting. Schedule it in your calendar for the next week as a non-negotiable appointment. It could be exercise, strategic planning, date night, reading. Why? The important will always be sacrificed to the urgent unless you schedule it. The mistake is overscheduling and burning out. Start with one slot. The outcome is a life that aligns with your values, not just your inbox. Step 4. In your next conflict or negotiation, consciously adopt a win-win mindset. Write down, "I want to find a solution that benefits both of us." Before the conversation, ask yourself what the other party truly needs. Why? Because zero-sum thinking limits possibilities. The mistake is faking it. Genuine intent is required. The outcome is more creative, enduring solutions. Step 5. Practice empathic listening in one significant conversation this week. Your only goal is to understand the other person so well that you can summarize their perspective to their satisfaction. Do not offer your own opinion until you have done this. Why? Because feeling understood is a deep human need. The mistake is listening with the intent to reply. Stay present. The outcome is a level of trust and openness that transforms relationships. Step 6. Engage in one synergistic collaboration. Invite someone with a different perspective to brainstorm a solution to a shared challenge. Explicitly value the difference. Say, you see this differently than I do, and I think that could lead to something great. Why? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The mistake is forcing synergy without first building trust. The outcome is a creative breakthrough. Step 7. Schedule renewal in all 4 dimensions this week. Physical, a walk or workout. Mental, read something inspiring. Social, emotional, connect meaningfully with a loved one. Spiritual, spend time in quiet reflection, nature, or whatever replenishes your soul. Why? The saw must be sharpened or it dulls. The mistake is treating renewal as optional. The outcome is sustained energy and effectiveness. Step 8. Teach one habit to someone else this week. Share what you're learning with a friend, a colleague, or a family member. Why? Teaching deepens your own understanding. The mistake is preaching. Instead, share your own experience. The outcome is mutual growth and accountability. These steps are not a sprint. They are the beginning of a new rhythm of life. The habits are not merely actions, they are ways of being. Start with one, then another. The spiral of growth will carry you upward. Let's gather the entire journey. We began with a powerful question. What do you want people to say at your funeral? That question, drawn from Stephen Covey's classic, set the tone for a deeply principled exploration of what it means to live effectively. The core message of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is that true effectiveness is an inside-out process, rooted in character and principles rather than surface-level techniques. Our paradigms, the way we see the world, determine our outcomes, and the most fundamental paradigm shift is from dependence to independence, and ultimately to interdependence. The private victory begins with Habit 1, be proactive. Reclaim the space between stimulus and response, and take absolute responsibility for your life. It continues with Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Define your personal mission based on timeless principles, and use it as the blueprint for your life. Habit 3, put first things first, turns that blueprint into daily reality by prioritizing what is important over what is merely urgent. These 3 habits constitute the mastery of self, the foundation upon which all relationships are built. The public victory opens with Habit 4, think win-win, the mindset of abundance and mutual benefit that makes enduring partnerships possible. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood provides the communication framework, teaching us to listen empathically before offering our own perspective. Habit 6, Synergize, is the creative fruit of the previous habits, where differences are valued and combined to produce outcomes greater than the sum of their parts. Sustaining all of this is Habit 7, Sharpen the Saw, the discipline of balanced renewal in the physical, mental, social, and spiritual dimensions. Without it, the other habits wither. With it, the entire system becomes a continuous upward spiral of growth, each pass through the habits deepening our understanding and expanding our effectiveness. These habits are not a quick fix. They are a way of life, a character ethic that stands in stark contrast to the personality ethic of shallow manipulation. They require courage, humility, and patience. But for those who commit to the journey, the reward is a life of integrity, contribution, and genuine influence. Stephen Covey gave the world a gift that transcends time and culture. The 7 Habits is not a book you read once and shelve. It's a companion for a lifetime, a mirror that reflects both your potential and your gaps. No single book can solve every problem or answer every question, but this one provides a framework that can organize and elevate the rest of your learning. If today's exploration has resonated with you, I encourage you to find the original work. Read it slowly, perhaps one chapter a week. Do the exercises. Let its principles sink into the marrow of your daily life. A summary is a map. The book is the territory, and the territory is rich with insights that can only be discovered through personal engagement. Let me leave you with a final thought. There is a version of you that lives from the principles we've discussed, a version that is calm in the storm because it is anchored to something solid, a version that chooses its response, that moves with purpose, that treats relationships as sacred, and that regularly renews its spirit. That version of you already exists as a possibility. It becomes reality one decision at a time, one habit at a time, one day at a time. The space between who you are and who you can become is bridged by the choices you make in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Begin with the end in mind, but begin now with the next choice that sits before you. The saw is in your hands. The tree is waiting. It's time to cut, and to do so with a blade that is sharp, a mind that is clear, and a heart that is whole.